All right, let me bring in my man, Daniel McAdams. He is rocking the glasses today. I don't think I've ever seen you with those glasses on,
Well, I
but that
can't
is
read.
perfectly okay. Executive Director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Daniel, how you doing today, man? You doing okay?
Good morning, Jamal. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I am glad that you can join me. I appreciate that you could join me.
Good to
I
see
have
Margaret on
been,
your show, by the way. I like Margaret a lot. I've followed her for years.
yeah, she is awesome. She is
Yeah,
cool
she's
people.
great.
She used to come on our show all the time. So no, she's cool people. She was nice enough to join me to have this kind of conversation about Musk and Trump punching
Yeah,
each other in
she's
the
great.
face. I have been watching Russia open a can of whip ass over the course of this week. It seems that the notion of appeasement is off the table. It seems that this idea of, okay, well, we're going to try to work with these guys for a deal. Well, Putin's speech made it very clear we consider these people to be terrorists. And look, from my point of view, if you're in a war, you should prosecute the war. Something seems to have changed, especially with the attack that took place on those airplanes, the murder of those people on those trains. It was just murder. They effectively waited for the train to get to the location and then blew it up. What I'm curious about is your take on this. From my point of view, Donald Trump is running a shadow war under the actual war. He wants Putin to accept his deal. I don't think Russia for a moment believes that Trump wasn't involved, that the US wasn't involved, or for that matter, the UK wasn't involved, even though Russia seems to be trying to spare Trump of the criticism on it, infecting it more on the UK, because I guess he believes that, you know, considering the lunatic asylum that was under the Biden years, even Trump being wishy-washy is better than being in one mode. Give me your take on this. So, how do you see it? I mean, do you see this as this kind of shadow war being run by Trump to try to get Putin to accept his deal, and that whatever he thought was going to happen is not going to happen? Like, this is escalated to a different level of intensity than was going on prior. Give me your thoughts.
Well, I think the couple of terrorist attacks were actually a gift to Russia in a way because it enabled Russia to break out of this kind of mold. Because what was happening is Trump himself and his administration, especially Kellogg, they're living in a fantasy world where they were going to impose a fait accompli on Russia. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to stop fighting for 30 days. Full stop, and then all of these things. Kellogg's 22-point plan,
Right.
and this kind of ripped the band-aid off of this and showed what it really was, which is that Russia was never going to accept this. It was never going to happen. Russia, for tactical reasons, didn't laugh the U.S. out of the room because they wanted to establish a dialogue for other reasons, and
Yes.
the attacks enabled Russia to say, "See, see what kind of a regime this is that we're fighting. That's it. The gloves are off. Don't even come to talk to us about a 30-day ceasefire. It's not going to happen at all."
Yeah.
So in a strange way, it was kind of a gift to Russia because it was a wake-up call for hopefully for the United States to understand.
I said the same thing. I said, A, this was good. I said, B, this was a wake up call. Russia was getting complacent. C, stop this appeasement nonsense. You're fighting a war. Act like it. And you don't have a negotiating partner. Nobody believes that anybody in this conflict wants a negotiation. Kind of. I think if Russia could get decent terms, they would, because ultimately, I think they just want security for the state. And they don't necessarily want to be at odds with these European capitals, or for that matter, even Ukraine. But that is not on the table for discussion. What's on the table is Kellogg's plan, which tries to freezes the conflict so we can get back to the conflict at some later date, kind of like in Syria, where it just erupts at some inopportune moment. That's not a deal. That's not a ceasefire. None of that stuff. They were going to put European troops in Ukraine. They were effectively NATO in Ukraine de facto. They were talking about having the U.S. take over the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. This stuff was nonsense. I guess my question to you is, Trump might not have known it was nonsense, but did Kellogg know it was nonsense? Meaning, did Kellogg put out a poison pill for the explicit purpose of not getting a deal? Because it seems outrageous. Like, when you look at just one last point. After the network went up, I was like, okay, well, I'll float. I'll see what happens, because maybe Trump actually is trying to get a peace deal. Maybe Trump walks. Maybe they come to some kind of terms. And when they put that plan out, I was like, all right, there's no deal. There is no ceasefire. There's no agreement. This is never going to take place. They're going to figure this out on the battlefield. Is Kellogg putting out a poison pill explicitly in order to keep the war going? Because that deal seems to be so outlandish that they were trying to push.
Well, all you need to know about Keith Kellogg, you saw this week, because when Andrei Yermak, who's the top advisor of Zelensky, when he came to town, the picture was there for everyone to see. When he came to
Yeah,
town, he walked in the room with Kellogg and gave him a massive bear hug as if it was a long lost buddy. Keith
yeah.
Kellogg is not an objective. He's not an objective person in this. He has family ties to Ukraine. He's very, very close to Ukraine. He wants Ukraine to win this war. So you can't have someone like that as your negotiator because the Russians are stupid, and everyone has seen now the relationship between Yermak, i.e., the Zelensky regime, and Keith Kellogg. He's not a fair actor in this whole thing. So that's the thing. He tried to impose a fantasy. Russia wasn't having it in the beginning, and this just makes it a lot easier for them to move ahead with what they're doing, which is literally what Russia is doing right now. I mean, it's establishing the area in Sumy, the
Mhm.
buffer zone in Sumy, they're advancing rapidly, et cetera, et cetera.
And they've been decimating Ukraine over the last few days. Last night was a withering campaign. I was showing the audience some of the images that was coming out on Slavyangrad and some of these other channels, where just pounding and pounding, hitting Kiev, hitting Sumy, and it wasn't just one night. It was multiple nights, or multiple days that they've been hitting their populations. I mean, for example, here is scenes after the missile strike hit a building in the ground. All right, so here's one of the strikes. This one is new from DD Geopolitics. They do God's work. This is Sarah Bill's
Yeah,
organization.
she's great. Sarah.
And they've been doing this all night. I mean, for the last several days, ever since, like you said, it ripped the chain off the moment that they did those terrorist attacks and everything else. It seems that Trump has come to the conclusion of letting this play out. Correct me if I'm wrong. When I was listening to the readout and I was listening to Trump in his conversation, and he made this analogy to, yeah, man, sometimes you just have to let kids fight. It's like, okay, fair enough. And he's like, they just have to keep punching it out until they finally come to some conclusion that they want to make peace. Is that where we are now? Where Trump just recognizes, all right, I'm not going to be able to end this. And all of these highfalutin plans that I had in the very beginning are going to come for naught. And they just have to fight it out until Ukraine gets to the brink of destruction where they may be willing to come to the table. Or do you think he's going to, the better question is, do you think he's going to walk? The money is used up. The weapons that Joe Biden gave to Ukraine, that is up at this point. Zelensky is going to have to find like $20 billion from somewhere. He may get it from Europe. But do you think that the U.S. is going to pass another budget to give Zelensky more money? I'm super curious about whether he walks and what it means when he walks.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I mean, one of the problems with the religion called American exceptionalism is that people who espouse it are convinced themselves and are completely convinced that the rest of the world is stupid, and that
Yep.
only these exceptional Americans can come in and sort it out, can get the kids to stop fighting on the playground, whatever, what have you. Everyone else is stupid but us. And that's a problem because it doesn't work. The real world doesn't work in this manner. And so the idea that only the United States can stop this war is false because the U.S. doesn't understand what started the war. They don't
Yeah.
understand the antecedents. They don't understand 2014. They don't understand the plight of Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine. And they don't care and they are not interested in understanding. They're not interested in learning anything about this. For them, it's just, we're the Americans, we're going to come in and we're going to put a stop to it. Well, the United States is a party to the war. They have been in the war for 10 years on the side of Ukraine.
Thank
That
you.
is what they're doing. And you can't be both a referee and a boxer at the same time. It doesn't work.
God bless you for saying that. Because people seem to be confused. Even like social media analysts are like, Trump should call Putin. And I kept saying, call Putin for what? Like, what are you going to tell him? The strategic assets that Ukraine hit was obviously they were getting either UK and the US satellite imagery. They're supposed to believe, or we're supposed to believe, that this was planned for 18 months. The CIA had been in Ukraine for what, 10, 15, 20 years? And nobody knew? It's like you guys are like just ignoring any level of intelligence, like we're just meat with no brains. But that's what they're selling. And you get many social media running with that as if that's the way to go. Is Trump going to continue to give them money? Meaning, is he going to have to push through a bill through Congress to give them more money to proceed with the war? Or do you think he walks? Because this fence sitting is getting tiring.
Well, he is expending an enormous amount of political capital on this so-called big beautiful bill, which is a terrible bill.
Yeah.
It ramps up military spending and cuts Medicare and Social Security spending. Regardless of what you think about those things, I think we probably would agree that if you had to spend on one of the two of those, it wouldn't be on more welfare
Yes.
for the rich, which is what
Agreed.
military spending is. He is expending an enormous amount of political capital. And particularly, by the way, this last 24 hours where some strange things have happened, it's ripped open that wound. Maybe someone's been in a coma and they don't know. But I mean, after having expended that capital, which I don't know that he'll get it. He may not get it in the Senate. They're going to rewrite it in the Senate, I think, for sure. But nevertheless, after this, he's going to come back to Congress and say, okay, we need another 30 billion. Now, Congress would love to do it because they love nothing more than funding wars. Because funding wars is funding the military industrial complex, and those are the people who make campaign donations. Those are the people who fund the think tanks. That keeps Washington going. Nevertheless, I think the outcry in Trump's base, the growing outcry in Trump's base, would be so deafening that it would be, I think, absolutely damaging. I don't know how they could ramp it up to get the Americans amped up about spending another 30, 40 billion dollars on Ukraine. I don't know how they could do it.
Especially after spending, 2 years screaming about Joe Biden and his war. Joe Biden is spending all of this money on this war. I can't believe Joe Biden is spending money on this war. And then he turns around and does the exact same thing. That seems to be politically damaging. But see, that's the Lend-Lease, I'm putting in quotes since it's D-Day, the Lend-Lease thing with the mineral deal, that apparently they're like pages that nobody has seen, even members of the RADA when they voted for it, which is astonishing when you really think about that. That seems to be his gateway to do it. Effectively, instead of giving you money and giving you weapons, we'll sell it. And we'll sell it with this agreement that in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, who the hell knows how many years, if indeed a profit is made, that you'll pay us back through that mechanism. Okay, this is a boondoggle, right? The entire point of this is just finding a gimmick to give them money and weapons without having your hands on it as if you gave it to them. Basically, it's like, hey, MAGA, the issue was that we were giving them this stuff, but now we're not giving them this stuff anymore. They're buying it. That's the way I read it. Is that the way you read it also?
Yeah.
Meaning, if that's true, he's not getting out of the war under that model.
It's like your crackhead friend or something coming by. Hey, man, can you loan me some money? I'll
He give
pay
you
you
a quarter.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pay you back. Yeah, it's insane. But even beyond the money issue, they can always print it out of thin air and all this and that. They hide it through inflation, which of course means that the poor pay the bill because inflation
Right.
hurts the poor. It doesn't hurt the rich. You can afford $10, $20, carton of eggs if you're rich. It's not going to bother you. So even if you can get beyond the money, they can't build the weapons fast enough that Ukraine needs. And I was listening to one of the shows I listen to, of course, besides yours, is the Duran and Alexander Mercouris.
Alexander McAdams is
And
fantastic.
he's great, yeah. And he made the great point that Raytheon. See, that the problem for Ukraine and why all these dramatic video that you've shown is that they're out of Patriot missiles. They have no.
Yes.
They have no air defense any longer. It's gone. And even Merz in Germany said, we can't give anymore, man. We've given you a quarter of all of our Patriots, and we got to keep some for ourselves because the
Yep.
Russians are coming. Haven't you heard? But anyway, even if Raytheon said they're going to ramp up production and they're going to be able to make 600 of Patriot missiles per year, and if that's the case, that won't even be enough for Ukraine. So
Nope.
forget about the U.S. needs. Forget about our allies wanting to buy some. It would suck up the entire production. It's literally impossible. We don't have the industrial capacity to keep up with Russia right now in this war game. So money
This
even itself is irrelevant.
it's not enough. Yeah. This is the issue with the capitalistic system, in part. You will totally disagree with me on this, but there are some functions that are specific to government. The ability to defend yourself is one of those things. So no, I'm not getting rare earth from China for my military equipment. That's something that I want to be able to have in-house to be able to produce, especially in a country like America that is just massive. No, I'm not giving up military production. At the very least, those factories are going to be there just in case I need those factories to ramp back up again in case I get into a larger war. And no, I'm not going to leave it to the interests of private enterprise to build my weapons, or at the very least, let's say what I want for weapons. It's not going to be left up to private enterprise to decide upon, or just some kind of financial whims. I mean, we spend all of this money on weapons, and I keep pointing out there's no way to know if we have a return on investment. Whereas Russia has an $80 billion military budget, and they're producing 3 times more than all of NATO combined. That's astonishing. China, same thing. China is like $240 billion. They've only increased theirs because the US increasing theirs like $1 trillion. But again, the amount that they spend on the weapons and the return on investment that they get from it is dramatic in comparison to what half of our budget is going to personnel. The other half is going to like weapons and everything else. We don't even know that what the F-35 only works 50% of the time. And it's the Patriot missiles. This is one of the saddest videos or funniest, depending upon your point of view. Apparently, the Patriot missile has what I call a fuck it option. That when its life is being threatened, it gives this primal scream at the very end of its life. This is one of those Patriots dying a miserable death. Rocket launch, rocket launch, rocket launch. What's this? Each one of those things is like a $500 million. Rocket launch. And of course, the death blow is coming. Where is it? Bam. Death blow. These things aren't doing their jobs. And of course, no missile system is perfect. But I keep seeing these videos of these things being hunted down and destroyed. And every one of those things that are destroyed can't be replaced, to your point.
They're not very good. And I would agree with you on everything except for one point, which is what we're really looking at is not a capitalist system, it's corporatist. You have corporations in bed with government. I mean, this is people like to throw the word fascism around, but this is textbook fascism. It's not private enterprise, because the basically what these companies do is that they they socialize costs. So we pay the costs and they privatize their profits. So we have to pay for the development of all these different weapon systems, but then they'll sell them overseas for a profit, to our partners for a profit, or they'll give them somewhere, they'll give them to Israel, and we have to pay for it twice to develop them and to send them to Israel or what have you. So the system is terrible, but it's because it's a corporatist system, a fascist system that we have, rather than a capitalist, which I hate the word. The word itself is not the right word, is a free market system. In a free market system, the market would decide, and we would need defense. And I actually tend to agree with you. I hate government, but I don't believe that things like our national defense should be privatized, even though they're not really private. They are in bed with government.
That's a fair point. Fair point. That's a fair point. I think corporatism is just capitalism grown up. Like one is a schoolboy, the other one is an adult. But I agree with you that it's the interplay between the two. Like the moment that you have people with means, let's say somebody like a Musk or somebody else, and it says, hey, I have $100 billion. I will give you $1 billion to run your campaign. And when you get elected, I want contracts. So someone like Palantir, for example, gets to all of a sudden get all of this governmental information. And it's like, okay, well, did the fact that they help put money into the campaign have anything to do with the fact that you're now giving them contracts? That's a little strange, right? And it's like, is it what we really want to have this kind of overarching technocracy of oversight and surveillance in America? We used to joke about stuff like that with China. And this is happening under a Republican that ostensibly is supposed to be somewhat more skeptical of government. What the hell is happening with this?
See, you're coming in our direction, Jamal, because how did Palantir get its start? It got its start through a big infusion of government money. It's the federal government through In-Q-Tel, the CIA company that was the incubator for Palantir. So I agree with you. These monsters are hatched, but they're hatched by government itself. So one of the big problems is that the government is too big. It tries to do too much. And it doesn't do the right things because of the influence of money. It's a Frankenstein monster.
Yeah.
No question about it. And it's like, the weapon systems, it doesn't work. Don't blame us, man. We're just Raytheon. We're just building the damn things, If you would have given us another $100 billion, they might have worked 50% of the time instead of 40,
Give me a
Whereas if
take
you're in
on.
a place like Russia and you do that, you
You're gonna
certainly
die.
would be out of a job, maybe even
Yeah,
worse.
yeah. You may be out of your life if you build some nonsense
Mhm.
like that. That's not working. It
Certainly in the
just seems
slammer.
like they're. I know we would find a disagreement in this somewhere, like in regards to. I do think the state needs to be intimately involved in regards to what is in the interest of the state and preservation of that state. And if it's we need these weapon systems, okay, I don't want a corporation telling me what we should buy. I want us saying this is what we need in regards to, and I think that's what they do in Russia. Like they say, this is our priorities right now. These are the things that we need in order to build to defend the nation, defend the state. It's not an offensive war in that sense. We need to be able to defend the homeland. Same thing with China. And so you don't have to spend $1 trillion if you're not going around attacking other countries. We don't.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you, Jamal, but you hit the
No,
nail on the head right there because we have to also understand what is our foreign policy. If our foreign policy is to run the world, well, then you're going to have to spend $1 trillion a year. That's just how it is. So you have to start with defining what our role in the world is first, and then you can say, okay, how much is it going to cost? Are we just going to do the Western Hemisphere? Okay, how much is that? We got to take on China. Okay, how much is that? We never get past that point because the neocons dominate the conversation. And the neocons, who do they get paid by? The war machine, right? So the people like you and I, we can yell all we want, but we don't have the clout. In America, most of America is in a coma and they just don't care because war never touches them, or at least it hasn't yet. It hasn't
not yet.
touched them yet.
Last
And that's
question
the
before I let you go. This is something Ron Paul used to always talk about. And God, man, they used to treat him so bad. They had like, I was talking to someone, I think it was, is it Sarah or someone else, where they were talking about how Ron Paul would be in the election. Ron Paul would be clearly the number 2 spot. And they would not even show him. They would just say, here's number 1, here's number 3. And he would be on a debate stage and he would make sense in the stuff that he was saying. And yet they would act like, oh, isn't he cute? Ron Paul was right. A lot of this stuff, especially around this notion of the military budget, and especially around this notion of our plans around the world, we are $36 trillion in debt. The quote, big, beautiful bill, big is right, is going to put another $20 trillion of debt on top of that. They don't see in Washington that this is unsustainable. Like, it's not even for like, I maybe could justify it if my lefty priorities were being settled. Like, everybody gets healthcare. There are no homeless. We have high-speed rail going from one side of the country to the other. Meaning, if you are building real physical stuff, that there's a return on investment for it. Maybe I shut up. But that's not what they're doing. They don't see that. I mean, you've been in Washington, you work with the Institute. What is in their minds when they say, yeah, we're going to put $20 trillion on the debt, no issue?
very little. Very little is in their minds. And what I've seen conservative influencers on social media say, yeah, the bill is going to add a lot of debt, but you know what? It's going to be the biggest crackdown on illegals ever, and so the debt we can deal with that later because this is what we got to deal with right now. And that's so they just don't care. They just don't care because they're paid to not care. And the average person, the average Joe, he's going to pay for it through inflation. He's going to pay for it when a financial collapse comes. But we have a sick society. We really have a sick society.
Daniel, that is disturbing. Look, I'm a lefty, right? Like, supposedly, I don't care. Like, I'm okay with investment because I think investment, especially if it's done right, can lead to growth, and growth can balance out the fact that you've invested. This is not what they're doing. Like, this is something else. Daniel McAdams. God, man, I really appreciated this conversation today. I needed this conversation today. Daniel McAdams, he's executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. You can learn more about Daniel at the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity by going to ronpaulinstitute.org. You also do videos. You guys do videos like I don't know if it's standardized. Is it standardized at this point? I see
Yeah,
them every so often.
Monday through Friday, live at noon on Rumble, right now at least on Rumble, but the Ron Paul Liberty Report.
Fair enough. My man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jamal. Take care.
Have a good one. All right.